Alright, this is the start of turn 11. I received 150 gold from Pythium as an apology for his having bumped and killed my expansion party. And then I received a tear-filled message from Marignon about having bumped and my having killed his expansion party. It was nice of Pythium to give me that gold just as a way of saying sorry and that he doesn't want to have a war in spite of the fact that my expansion party died. I did not send gold to Marignon because I'm planning on killing Marignon shortly. This was our basic expansion right up here. The one thing that I did differently here, just in order to ensure that nothing went dramatically wrong, is that I put this heavy infantry guy way up here to draw the arrow fire. And it worked. He has all the arrows launched at him. And the advantage to this is that there's now no chance that this guy gets shot. So we do lose that one heavy infantry man, but I am able to protect that necromancer who died for no reason last time. Here, my Tritons run away after sustaining a few losses. Fortunately, since they're faster than the Ekwipt, they do manage to get away. But unfortunately, Tritons suck, as we saw. So they can run up quite quickly, and then once they actually do get into range, they don't really kill things very well. They manage to cause some poison, but even when they're surrounding the Ekwipt warriors as they are here, they just don't kill them fast enough before they rout. I have my Tritons split up into two squads so that one squad routing doesn't rout the whole army, but it's still not enough. And yeah, my Tritons do at least manage to escape, which is nice, so I still have 31 of them left, and I can regroup and go for yet another assault shortly. Here in Scythia, we lose a few of our mercenaries, but we otherwise expand fine. Since this is the last province that we can take over here, I figured I may as well bring my real expansion party along in addition to my mercenaries. Given how much income we have, we are doing yet more construction. So we now have castles underway here. We have a castle underway here, which is on our western front, so we can have something bordering Marignon, which is also going to pull resources from some relatively resource-rich provinces right up in here. So even though we still haven't finished our second fort, we have a number of forts all going up at the same time, and if you look at our income right up here, our income is still massively ahead of our upkeep, so even with full mage recruitment going once our forts do get underway, we'll still be able to continue churning out mages, or to continue churning out additional forts as we find space for them. And here, basically just because I don't have anything else for this guy to do, I'm going to have him search. There's a few sites that you can find with Holy, not all that many, but enough that it's worth searching if you don't have anything else to do with your priests. This province is lost to Vine Ogres and Vine Men. That looks like it's an indie attack, which hurt TNG, but it's nice for Ol, most likely, because it means that his borders with TNG aren't going to be super ugly. Joman has finally managed to expand south, and he is cutting me off from my expansion over this way towards this throne. I had actually wanted to take pretty much all of these provinces over here, but I can afford to let that go for now. And Joman also said that he was cool with my keeping this, and since this is cold, because it is the middle of winter, I can move over here and take this farm. This guy here has brought over some additional blind fighters because they were built at my cap and I can't really do much with them there. And yeah, so since I want to mobilize blind fighters in this direction anyways, just in order to help with expansion, or on the off chance that I do need to fight Joman, I figured I may as well bring them with the guy who's site searching up over in this direction. Here, my regrouped Tritons are just going to make another assault, which they may or may not win, but I don't really care because these Tritons are awful, and I'm only building them because they are my only avenue for further underwater expansion. And that's the turn. We'll be conducting our war with Marignon probably as soon as this fort finishes, which still gives us half a year in order to build up forces, possibly get additional mages. But our research, when we do get some research mages going, is still going to be in Conjuration, just on the off chance that we do need to fight Pythium as well. And that's the turn. Alright, and this is turn 12, so the very start of year 2. Our site searcher has found a magic site, battlefields, that's additional death gems. Pythium and I basically talked, and I just complimented him on his bless on the turn that we had bumped, so nothing major going on there. Olm was basically just telling me that I had been asking Ulm for those provinces that Joman had already taken, and he just informed me of that fact. Here, we lose another Chthonian Necromancer, which is awful. I put this crossbowman here up front with the idea being that he would be far enough forward to draw fire, similar to what that one heavy infantry guy had done. And the arrow goes all the way over there and kills the Chthonian Necromancer anyways. So these guys are just arrow magnets. My blind fighters immediately rout, but luckily we just have enough crossbowmen that they're able to take on the province literally on their own. And that's essentially an argument for Scales Gartha right there. That you really don't need your invulnerable sacreds in order to take provinces. So we lose one light crossbowman, and we take over this province. That's good. We get to see TNG in action again, but we've already seen their guys go. It's just heavy cavalry. Here, we kill the last Ichthyid Lord, so there's no more commanders here. But my Tritons are out again. So, yeah, these guys are bad, as we've seen many times before. The good news about that Ichthyid Lord being dead is that we now no longer need to build any more of these terrible Tritons. Because anyone attacking this province will cause the independents to rout because they don't have any more commanders. I'm guessing that he dies to poison here after my guys are out. Yeah, because as bad as these Tritons are, they at least have some poison damage on their coral knives. Yep, looks like that's exactly what happened. This is the Ichthyid Lord right over here. He's got 3 hit points left and he's routing because he's taken a bunch of damage, including enough poison damage most likely to finish him off. Yep, and that's that fight. We managed to also kill off most of the Ichthyids as well, but that doesn't really matter because they're just going to rout anyways. So I send this guy here on his own. I'm going to leave these Tritons over here and possibly build up another expansion party to fight the other similarly weak Tritons, or potentially even the Triton Guards, who are slightly better on account of their having some length on their weapons. Over here, we're going to start building our castle because this is a farm province, which is nice. This guy is going to need to go up through here in order to actually reinforce with these blind fighters. Joman gave me permission to move through here. I don't remember the exact deal with that. I think I need to like wait a turn or something. But yeah, eventually we'll be able to bring our blind fighters over to here, reinforce these crossbowmen here. I'm building a scout to basically take over fort production so that this guy will be free to lead the crossbowmen, and then we're going to push over this way and potentially get some additional provinces. Here, we started recruiting these indie crossbowmen. These aren't the least resource cost crossbowmen, but they're still only 14 resources. They're worse than the Agarthan crossbowmen both by having an inferior crossbow, low protection, lower morale, but most importantly, they have only one map move. However, because my mages all have map move 1 and my blind fighters all have map move 1, it's not the end of the world that we can't move 2 squares at a time. We built a temple over here, essentially just to be able to recruit blind fighters and potentially spread our gold increasing scales. And we'll most likely be building a temple over here as well, because we'll want at least a little bit more blind fighter production for our oncoming war. Here we're still just recruiting our capital mages and what blind fighters we can. And this guy here is carrying a small group of the blind fighters over this way. I want to keep at least a small garrison over here, where we're building this castle, just in case we do need to worry about TNG. We saw that TNG retook this province here, and I'm also bumping up the province defense over here. I figure that between them, the blind fighters, and our existing crossbowmen, we should be able to take on even a heavy cavalry charge. If he starts building up cavalry all along this border, then we'll be a little bit worried. As it is, though, I expect that he's more likely to fight Ulm or Man over here. Given that we see only one Man province over here, and we know that TNG's capital is over here, we can assume that TNG owns at least some of this territory over here, which makes it very likely that he's actually cut off Man's expansion. So if that's the case, then Man is actually going to be very small. We've discovered Arcocephaly. So Arco in LA is basically the most similar to the other variants of that same nation, so astral communions galore. In LA, they have a little bit of death magic, but are essentially otherwise unchanged. And yeah, we've discovered that Olms owns at least a little bit of territory up in this area. But since we know that Jomon owns this territory over here, we also know that Ulm can't have expanded all that much further in this direction. And that's the turn. Alright, this is turn 13, and we see a fight. So it is apparent here that Tianqi is invading Man, and we get to see Man's Pretender in action as well. So this is a cave province, which is noticeable because it's dark. That means that these guys have reduced attack and defense. Agarthans, the guys with 50% dark vision, would have only -1 attack and defense. Blind fighters would have no penalty at all. And these guys here, the cave natives, similarly don't have any attack and defense, or these guys have a slight attack and defense penalty because they have only 50 dark vision as well. Most cave natives have 1, but these guys are bad. And then his Ghost King here, being an undead unit, has no penalty as well. So this guy's ungeared, but he does have Dom 9, which means that he has all 1. Ghost Kings have a base fear of 10, which is increased by 1 for each point in Death Magic. So with Death 5, he's got 15 fear. So between these two, he's actually going to be fairly resilient. The fear aura is going to reduce the morale of enemies around him, and they need to make a successful morale check in order to attack him because of his awe. The downside is that he has very low protection, which means that he's still going to take damage from things that do manage to hit him. He makes up for this in part by being ethereal, which means that 3/4 of the attack won't hit him at all. An Awake Ghost King Pretender is somewhat risky. I found that they don't actually expand particularly reliably, even with Dom 9, unless you're able to give them some basic gear. I think that the Earth Magic is intended to help with that, but he would still need to have some Earth Gems in order to forge the Black Steel Plate and so on in order to make him survivable. The Astral and Death is presumably in order to make him a late-game super combatant. With Astral 5, Death 5, those are the minimum paths required in order to cast Soul Vortex. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. To cast Soul Drain, so the battlefield-wide Soul Vortex. Soul Vortex produces an aura around the caster, which increases the caster's health and, or restores the caster's fatigue and health for any additional damage that it deals, but is negated by magic resistance. Soul Drain is a battlefield-wide version of that spell, so it essentially hits the entire battlefield, and while particularly magic-resistant units or regenerating units and so on can allow your army to survive the spell because it doesn't deal a huge amount of damage, it is going to steadily restore the caster's fatigue and health, making it very difficult to take down. And then Tianqi's army is just some heavy cavalry. I don't think that he expected the Pretender to be here. And you can see here that those little flashes, that's them failing to hit on account of awe. And you can also see here that their morale is being reduced. So the Ghost King isn't doing all too much damage, like he's only hitting for 1 attack per round with his Rod of Death, but he is managing to avoid being hit by these guys. And yeah, well, his defense is very good, and their attack's actually quite bad on account of the darkness. A large part of that is that awe reducing their attack, their ability to hit him. So resilient as he is, he manages to get his fear aura to steadily tick down the morale, which eventually makes the cavalry run away. So LA Man is actually able to hold his province over here, thanks to his Ghost King Pretender. My scout over here is able to see that it looks like TNG's actually cut him off, so he's launched a multi-pronged attack from the looks of things. So yeah, it's very good that his Pretender survived here, because if he hadn't, he would be in a terrible situation. He's already in a bad situation. I have to assume, judging by the way things are over here, that his capital is in one of these 3 provinces, and regardless of which it is, unless he was able to take this throne, these 2 provinces are cut off from any forts that he might have, which means he's not getting any income from them. I'm going to have to assume that TNG just took these this province at least this turn. Here I'm able to see Marignon's army in action again. It looks like he must have lost this province to Indies, because pirates are not a normal Indie population type. But pirates also have no shields, and they have very modest protection, so when you have a bunch of crossbowmen here, it doesn't take a lot of work to kill them all. Here, my Triton commander successfully routed the Ichthyids. And I finished recruiting my second full Triton party, so I'm going to send them over here to take on the similarly weak Tritons, while over here we start amassing these Ichthyid warriors. Ichthyid warriors, as I mentioned, are cheap and low resource cost for their high HP and protection, and while their combat stats are unimpressive and they have only stone spears, they still make great line holders, and compared to the other underwater fighters, especially these awful Tritons which I've had to build so far, they can actually do quite well. Looking over Pythium's stuff, it doesn't look like he's actually built any forts. Pythium can afford to build forts a little bit later on account of it having foreign recruit mages. However, it does show that he's a little bit behind from where I am, at least. The Adept of Pyrphlegeton is a mage that can arrive from events if he's taken high luck, or it's a mage that can be recruited from sites. So he might have found a fire site which enables him to recruit these guys. If he has one to take it from him, but it's not a high priority, it's not like a game-winning site like a library, or a site that would let him recruit lore masters. And I also have some fire from my own stuff, so it's not like a huge asset for me to take. In the meantime, my first fort finished, and I'm going to start building Chthonian alchemists, and because I'm somewhat gold capped, I'm going to try to spend all of my resources on my heavy crossbowmen here. So I'll eventually be able to drag these guys over to the front, and I'm sending Thursman to go collect them. But if I wanted to, or if I felt the need to get as many crossbows as possible, I would have gone for the light crossbows, and I have a little bit of gold left over. But given that I'm not urgently preparing for war, I'm just leisurely doing so, having the higher armor of the crossbows for the same gold cost is definitely beneficial. Here, meanwhile, I'm building a little bit more of these indie crossbows, and I'm also rounding out this squad. You want to have at least 5 units in any given squad for the morale bonus. I tend to go for 6 just in order to have 2 full squares of 6, but 5 is the absolute minimum. This province also has some indie crossbowmen, and while its resources aren't particularly high, the map settings let me recruit at least a few of them in spite of the fact that they cost 23 resources. Here, our castle is still underway. And we're going to move this guy up here in order to allow him to build a lab on this castle once it finishes. We're starting an additional castle over here. This is partly to help protect this board over here because this farm is going to have relatively few resources even when drawing resources from these 2 forests. And given that we don't know what TNG is going to do after his war with man, it's helpful to have additional castles to protect the borders. And having more forts up is always a good thing just in order to recruit more mages. We'll probably be building an additional castle over here. That's what this scout's going to do. This castle here is going to protect the throne. It's not super important to get them up this early, because a throne grab isn't particularly likely. But we'll need to fort it eventually, and because we're no longer resource capped on our capital blind fighter recruitment, having the additional fort over here will at least let it serve as a research hub. This guy is bringing up some blind fighters to serve as a front line while this guy brings the crossbowmen up, and then we're going to take this province and then cede it to Jomin, and that's basically what we're paying him in order to let him move these guys through here without his causing any trouble. And that's the turn. Alright, this is turn 14. I sent Pythium a message asking him if he wanted to help me fight Marignon. The reason that I did that was actually not because I felt that I needed his help, but more to inform him that this war was coming, and to basically see if he was interested in getting involved at all. I'll know, or I'll be able to tell from his and Marignon's response whether or not he's planning on fighting me, which is what I'm actually concerned about with this. Here, this was the province that we're essentially taking for Jomin. We're going to leave it with no province defense over here. The fact that it has death scales and magic scales means that it certainly has a magic site. The magic scales might be from Jomin, but the death scales are definitely not. I know for sure that no Jomin in his right mind would ever run that, so yeah, we're going to assume that there's at least some sort of death site over here. Meanwhile, this castle's still underway, and once these guys get down, they'll be able to start pushing over here and taking more indies. Here, my Tritons were able to beat the indie Tritons, mostly just on account of the fact that I had more of them. This trade isn't anything special, and I didn't do anything fancy about my formation here, just 2 squares, same as last time. Given that these guys have terrible morale problems, even the slight penalty from the line formation can matter, and given that these guys are set to hold an attack, and I know that these guys are going to run most of the way across the map, I'm still able to get first hit. And the Indie Tritons are as weak as we saw. And then here we see the Ghost King of Man trying to retake his land, and his capital is already under siege. We can't see what's besieging it, but, you know, we have some idea. It's probably going to be just a blob of heavy cavalry. My scout was discovered and attacked over here, so we see, again, just, you know, a blob of heavy cavalry. An odd number of commanders here. I believe that mounted scout is his prophet, because this is LA and people don't recruit mounted scouts. Yeah, so that's his prophet. Heroic toughness, additional HP, but he seems to be outside of his dominion, so not a lot of hit points there. We have a witch being caught, so this is more along that misfortune arc that I was talking about earlier, where misfortune events tend to spiral outwards and make more misfortune. And here we have a order misfortune event, which reduces province income. Not the end of the world. These aren't terrible events. I'll definitely recover. We are building castle over here, and I'm starting to recruit some of these heavy cavalry. That's basically just to give me some flankers for when I'm fighting Marignon. These guys don't end up doing much, but at the time the idea was that since I do have the goal to recruit them, I may as well make at least one little squad, and I can either use them as an additional front line, or more practically, get something that's actually fast moving, because Agartha doesn't have any of those natively. Marignon is still just keeping his troops up over here because I've got my troops up over here. So I keep the province defense over here high. We're essentially both just flexing on the border. And then, yeah, I'm getting my 6th heavy infantry guy in order to fill out the squad numbers, as I've mentioned. And then here, just more of these crossbowmen who are eventually going to be picked up and brought to join my main army over here. Aside from that, not a very interesting turn. Oh, we actually do see Marignon's capital over here. We saw that earlier, but I'd forgotten to mention it. So we can confirm that Marignon is indeed tiny. Presumably Pythium has scouted this as well. So we're going to see if the fact that I've notified Pythium about our ongoing war, or upcoming war rather, means that Pythium is going to fight me, or if it means that he's going to try to swoop in and take the capital for himself, or, best case scenario, he's like, you got this, and goes to deal with other stuff. So, Pythium is going to have a fairly wide border with Arcocephaly here on his south, and he's intruding somewhat close to Joman's capital over here. Not as close as I have, but I've been talking to Joman closely enough to know that he's actually okay with my presence here. Ulm, meanwhile, has taken the only farmland within striking distance of Joman's cap, which is likely to cause some tensions. And we discover that Gas Capital is not, in fact, up here where I thought it was, which means that it's most likely in this area over here, which actually makes it rather close to Tianchi, and also means that this whole area over here is likely to contain Arcocephaly's capital, and also means that Arcocephaly is also going to be rather large. So even though expansion isn't even finished yet, we can already see that the 3 major powers for this game in terms of size are going to be Pythium, myself, and Arcocephaly, and then hopefully I'll be able to eke out an early lead. Pythium's Major Bless most likely hurt his scales enough to the point where he's not going to have major scaling benefits. Pythium has at least a little bit of blood magic, not a whole lot, but it's there. And they can use that blood magic to summon up assassins, which can potentially be annoying, and free spawn maenads as Pangea can. Not to quite the same extent, but they can at least do that, and that's sort of like a niche strategy that gives them additional options when they do break into blood. Overall, though, I'm not super worried about Pythium scaling, since again, a bless like that means that he's going to take a while to get there, if he gets there at all. Arco, meanwhile, can actually scale mostly just based on the strength of Mind Hunting. It's very annoying to deal with as he gets more Mind Hunters, and Arcocephaly is uniquely good at using it because he has priestesses to heal the Mind Hunters that get caught by Astral Mages. As Agartha, I have a few Astral Mages, namely my S-Random Cap-Only Mages and my S-Random Servants of the Oracles, but neither of them are going to be particularly high-leveled, and until my Pretender comes out, I can't boost up my Astral level all that high either. So it's going to be kind of a pain until I can get those Astral boosters out in order to deal with Mind Hunting. But luckily our positioning and the fact that mine hunting is relatively late in research on a difficult research game means that I do have time to get there. So I don't need to worry about the mine hunting right away. Instead I can focus on taking out the scaling threats like Marignon on my border here. And that's the turn. Alright, so this is turn 14, and one thing that I'd forgot to mention last turn, but which we had already seen on the map, is that Arcocephaly and Ulm are actually fighting. I had sent Arcocephaly a message asking if he wanted to team up on Ulm. That was more of like a probing question, sort of get a feel for the relationship between those two. It's in my best interest to have Arco as an ally because we don't have a border, which means that he can't betray me. And Ulm is a good target because he's another scaling threat on account of his foreign research, high astral power, and most importantly, blood magic. But it seems that Arco's already ahead of me on that, so he already was attacking Ulm. We see a fight over here, just a big blob of Arcocephaly's troops, most notably a couple war elephants, a lot of chaff, and a small number of crossbowmen. But yeah, we'd already seen this because this province over here, which was in Ulm's cap circle, had already fallen to Arcocephaly, and naturally you don't go into people's cap circles unless you're planning on waging a real war with them. So, with Jomon cutting off Ulm's expansion over here, and potentially being agitated against them about them owning this farm, and Arcocephaly already charging right into their territory, we can assume that Ulm is going to have some serious trouble, and at least will not be bothering us. With TNG still occupied on dealing with Man, who has not claimed this province and is essentially toast at this point, it's time for us to start our invasion. So, seeing this like blob of Marignon's troops over here, I actually want to get the jump on him. So I actually believe, or I believed when I saw this, that Marignon was planning on invading me. And naturally, the correct response in invading is when you think someone is going to attack you, is you attack them first. So the plan here is that while this block of troops isn't large enough to take on this big army here of 150 guys, it is large enough to take on Marignon's province defense, hopefully. So I'm going to do that here and besiege this castle. And then this castle here is 2 months finished from building. We're going to try to finish this. If he attacks us, that's it. We lose it, but that's fine. And then, with this army over here, depending on where this army goes, I can essentially raid into Marignon to cut off this army's return. So, or to, if this army tries to, let's say it goes over here and wants to lift the siege, I can go over this way or up this way. Whereas if it tries to go deeper into my territory, my army can essentially trade and take a similar number of provinces despite being much smaller. So that's basically the big advantage of playing aggressively. You can cause damage while having fewer guys. So here we are building our other castle, which is almost finished, so we're putting our lab up. Site searching goes on apace. This thing is finished, we've got our temple, we've got our lab, we're starting to build guys. Because this province has low resources, even though it's pulling resources from these forests here, we're going to start recruiting a couple of these Chthonian reanimators specifically for the research bonus. They'll still be able to research, of course, or the resource bonus. They'll still be able to research, of course, which is nice, so definitely not a waste. But that's why we're building those over the alchemists up here. This castle is going to take a while to finish, and we've only just started this castle over here. Meanwhile, while this castle is still being built, we are going to start using our guys to continue our expansion over here. Our underwater expansion is actually going quite well. We've hired this mercenary group, the Swimming Men, to help take on this province over here. And my garbage tritons are actually doing great. They take on their blob of tritons over here, thanks to a successful morale check. And then they're going to take on the sea trolls over here. So sea trolls are regenerating, high HP, okay stat to attack, size 3 units. But there's very few of them, and they have low protection and fairly low defense, which means that my big blob of normally very bad guys can just surround them, overwhelm them, and hopefully kill them. If they succeed, great. If not, I don't want these guys to live anyway, so that's totally fine. Meanwhile, I'm continuing to mass these Ichthyids in order to have a more useful aquatic army that I can also potentially take on land once I bother buying amphibious commanders for them. Here, I continue to watch Arcocephaly. Oh no, that's just watching Arcocephaly go for the first time. So with TNG, I basically offered to I asked him if I could just have one of his provinces, and he offered to trade it for some provinces, which I can't really do because these guys are essentially required for my invasion of Marignan to work in order to not leave me with just this one path to get to him. I want to be able to go around. So I'm not going to pursue that trading of province option. This province over here is fairly weak. I'm surprised the Pythium hasn't taken it already, but given how large he is, he's probably just saving it for later. Given that it's a cave, it's probably a lower value province. While caves do have higher resources, they also have lower gold, and his troops are going to be slightly less good at fighting in them. His Hydras should still be able to take it without losses because, as we saw, Bakemono shows just don't do a lot of damage. But, you know, it doesn't hurt him to delay taking it for now. Meanwhile, Archocephaly started to build up some amphibious guys over here, but because I know that he is fighting Ulm, and I'd actually talked to him about fighting Ulm, I can assume that he's actually not going to use them to attack me. And because he has these provinces over here, we have to assume that Gath doesn't own all of these, so he'll most likely have access to this lake as well. So I basically just talked to him and asked him if he can go take over this lake and leave my lake alone, and turns out he's amenable to that. And that's the turn. Our war with Marignan is about to begin.